Good evening and welcome all, members of the public, councillors and officers. Apologies, I've got Councillor Peter Watley and Councillor Leslie Bruton, who's be with us later. She's had a tree emergency up in Tenbury, so take a bit of a time to get down here. Have we got any other apologies? No, thank you. Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other disclosable interests. Any from anybody? None? Right. Confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Anybody, any comment on the minutes of the last meeting? Yes, Councillor Cummings.
Chairman, we asked someone from Legal Services to come and educate us on alternatives, but the item's not on the agenda for this meeting. So where do we stand with that?
On that, ask.
It will be coming back to committee, Chairman, but it wasn't ready for this meeting. So hopefully the next meeting, but we'll keep you updated.
Does that mean we're going to change recommendations or what?
Can't say at this stage, but obviously we've taken on board what the feelings of committee. So
Right,
so we
fine.
need to have a dialogue with the applicant.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that, Paul. Any other comments on the minutes? Right, Barbara, do you want to propose them? Right, and David, did you second them? Oh, weren't you? That's unusual. Right, and you were. Right, Daniel, thank you. Right, so we had them proposed and seconded. All in favour? Any to the contrary? No. Right, 2 abstentions. Thank you. Right, so for those members of the public who aren't aware of them, going from my extreme left, we've got Kieran Power, who's Head of Development Management. Then next to him, we've got Lee Walton, who's a case officer. Next to me, Simon Jones, our Development Manager North. Next to me on my right-hand side, Jenny Ager. I'll get it right one of these days, Jenny Ager, Legal Advisor. And to extreme right, Bronwyn Tompkins, Democratic Services Officer. Right. And we're going to start this meeting with Kieran, who's going to give us a few words of wisdom. Kieran.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So before we move into the applications on the agenda tonight, the Chair's asked me to just set some context for members about some of the things that we're going to cover on the agenda. In terms of the general picture, all members will be aware of the National Planning Policy, and that sets the framework that we have to work within. A key part of that is what we call the planning balance, and that requires us to weigh up the benefits of proposals against the harms. And sometimes the scheme may conflict with certain policies, but if the benefits outweigh the harms, it's still judged to be acceptable. It is capable of being judged to be acceptable. Linked to this is the tilted balance, which comes from interplay where councils such as ours cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, or where policies are considered out of date. In those cases, the presumption of sustainable development applies, and inspectors that appeal tend to give significant weight to housing delivery. This lowers the threshold for what is considered to be acceptable, and it's a national trend we're seeing across appeal decisions. The test, as members will know in the NPPF, is does the identified harm significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme, and that's the key test we're required to exercise. The role of committee is vital. Officers provide a professional advice, but the committee are the decision makers. A committee member's duty in the decision-making process is not to represent individual residents directly. It requires committee to consider the merits of the scheme in a much wider context, considering the planning merits of each case and weighing up all the competing factors before them, and then reaching a conclusion that if there were a refusal, can it ultimately be defended as appeal. We have a number of applications on the agenda tonight that will require particularly careful consideration. These decisions are important locally, but they also have to align with the wider planning framework. If council's decisions are found to be consistently out of step with the framework, inspectors can and will substitute them with their own judgment, which has serious consequences for the council. I hope that frames our discussions this evening, and I think members, parish and residents do understand the difficult challenges that we face in the national picture, but I hope that's useful in setting the scene in which many of these applications are considered tonight. Thank you, Chair.
I asked Kieran to give that advice, basically because we've become aware that most, if not all, of our decisions where we've overturned officers' recommendation on large developments, and that's over 8 houses, I think, if I'm right, where we've gone against it, the inspectors have actually, in the present climate, overturned their decision. And I think we need to be aware of that. Right. I'm going to ask tonight, because we've got 3 applications. We've got 3 applications, and we do tend to normally be quite relaxed in their approach to it, but I'd hope that everybody will keep their considerations, their speeches as short as they are able to sensibly. Thank you. Douglas.
Has given us, I want you to stress for the record that the reason of this is because we don't have a 5-year plan, 5-year housing supply. Not that our proposals are inconsistent with planning policies, not inconsistent with what the rural and regional development plan is, the national development plan, and what our communities require. It's strictly based and mainly based on the fact that we don't have a South West Worcestershire development plan, which is being held up for getting on for 2.5, nearly 3 years. And I want that recorded for the records, because the implication is that we're refusing things unjustifiably. And I think that is wrong. It is seriously considered by the committee at length with our professional officers, with other outside officers if necessary, and it is not the case that our judgment is wrong. It's because we don't have a 5-year plan, 5-year available plan.
I've been considering my words, Douglas, about this, and I was going to say very much the same thing. I don't consider our decisions have been wrong, but present circumstances and law means that this tilted balance has to apply, and that is so throughout the country. There are very few councils with a plan in place. It's almost impossible to get them in. We're in fact, at the moment, we're one of the few, I think, where the plan is actually being considered for approval. A lot of them being turned down or withdrawn. And there are very few authorities with a 5-year supply, and it's almost impossible to get one. But we are where we are, and when it comes down to it, I think we do need to be mindful that if we make a decision that goes contrary to officers, we need to very consider this tilted balance, because it will be taken into consideration. And in the end, if we make too many decisions that do go the wrong way, then the decisions will be taken out of our hands.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, I think to clarify, it's not that members of this committee haven't made decisions without merit, and I think that's really important. It's not to
for the record and for the film.
Yes, that's quite right, and I think what's changed on the national picture is the interpretation and application of policy by planning inspectors, and that's changed from where we were previously, maybe, and we have to reflect on that, and that's where officers' recommendations reflect that change, and whether we think we've got robust cases where maybe in the past we may have been more successful at appeal. So I think it is that, and like I say, it's not because those cases didn't have merit, but it's the weight and interpretation that inspectors have applied when applying the planning balance. So I think that's quite right, and I hope that sort of clarifies that situation. Thank you.
With that, there is no update report that I've seen, so we go on to our first application, which is the bridge at Mayview, Newnham Bridge, Tenbury Wells. And Lee, I think you're presenting, aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I just go through the overhead, the proposals for the erection of 3 dwellings. This is the aerial photograph of the site, show the red outline showing you the location along the main road. We've got the red outline drawing that's been submitted, and then we've got a few photographs that show the access and view into the site as exists. We're then looking at the site from across the road. That's the road frontage and the roadside hedgerow. We're looking at the visibility, so towards Tenbury in that direction, and then towards the east. So those are the consideration and weights. As I said, the application's been made in the form of a permission in principle. The considerations are therefore limited to location, land use, and the amount of development that comes forward. All other detail is a matter for the subsequent technical application if this is approved. Newnham Bridge is a settlement without a development boundary in open countryside. The site's location isn't considered to be a suitable location in terms of policy 4. The committee report also observes why other sites locally in the past have been developed and whose circumstances would differ from the current application. Again, I need to point out the council's lack of a 5-year housing land supply and what weight that might bring to this application in its favour. But we would also say at this point, because 3 dwellings would be coming forward, that weight would equally be tempered by the small scale of development. Recommendation is to refuse, Chairman.
Thank you, Lee. We've got a parish council representative, Councillor D. Hubbard. If you go over there and press the button on your right-hand side, you get 3 minutes. I'll give you sort of about 20 seconds towards the end if you don't show signs of finishing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. Good evening. One of the first considerations when deliberating any planning application is to examine and evaluate the comments from consultations, whether they are in support or against such plans. There have been no objections from those consulted, which in the first instance is a huge positive. The collective parish council had no objection and chose to support the planning in principle. I have also made my own local inquiries and spoken to separate residents residing in Whitebrook Estates to seek their view and opinion. None have raised any objections or concerns. In fact, the common judgment was that development will have absolutely no impact on them personally, the estate as a whole, or the surrounding area. I myself live on the same main road, a short distance from the proposed site, and pass by on a daily basis. The development will have no impact to the main road. Visually, it will be minimal intrusion, with possibly only a roof line visible, especially with the retention of the existing hedgerow. From the aspects of Whitebrook Orchard, the properties would not be visible due to a tree-topped, elevated, disused railway embankment. No further access or frontages will be developed, and for all intents and purposes, the development could be built with very few actually noting its existence. Such would be the insignificant disturbance or interference to the landscape. Even highways corroborate the fact that the development is minor in nature. The plot itself is not green or brown land, but domestic garden, the size of which for most people is too large to effectively manage or require as part of their main domicile. The development of discrete housing is a good way of utilising excessive existing domestic residential land that has no other purpose. We all know full well there is a growing housing requirement, and albeit the parish is residentially small in comparison to many, the addition of 3 homes will be a welcome contribution to this necessity without infringement on greenbelt land, which the parish mainly consists of. Add to this, the Morphin Hills local housing survey conducted in 2009 indicated the area lacked a specific need for housing, the likes of single-storey bungalow-style dwellings, to cater for an ageing community, those downsizing from larger family homes requiring easy accessibility. Since this report, there have been no such developments in the parish other than larger family homes, mainly in range of 4 to 6 bedrooms. This development caters towards a specifically identified requirement with the inclusion of one such property. The Whitebrook Estate affords the benefits of safe school bus pick-up and drop-off, a local bus service to Worcester, Kidderminster and Tenbury Wells, direct access to the main A456 for vehicular transport, a local information notice board, and a very real feeling of village community living. Any new developments as residents would be welcomed into a very importantly existing community. And lastly, the Parish Council fully supports its planning in principle application and wholeheartedly believes it fulfils a local specific housing and national need, while completely proportional to any minimal impact or collateral effect on the surrounding area and the parish community. Thank you, everybody. Good.
Right. There's no objector as such, but we've got an applicant, Mr. Andrew Chatham. Again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, councillors. So, good evening. My name's Andrew. I live at Mayview with my family. We really value being part of the Newnan Bridge community. I note the officer's comments recommending a refusal. However, I also note that 550 metres away, there was a development at Station Close. The officer noted that actually the comments he made were transport was actually sufficient whilst limited. There is a regular bus service that carries regular buses to Worcester, Kidderminster and Malvern. As it stands at the moment, having lived there for several years, I know that there's genuine opportunities to access services without solely relying on the car. We do have a continual footpath to a school drop-off. There is a school bus on a regular basis. So there's no reason why I can personally see, from having read through the application and its comments from people involved so far, that an inspector would reach a different conclusion based on the fact that the proximity of the appeal site and its need for consistency. Development like this is important to maintain the vitality of our community and support local services. Importantly, this site is also part of a residential garden, which helps to reduce pressure for development on open countryside. It's not like we want to develop swathes of open countryside which offer a great view, which Newnan Bridge is surrounded by. With the council's housing land supply standing at just 2.06 years, the presumption in favour of sustainable development must apply. I do not believe the refusal decision demonstrates a significant or harmful impact that outweighs the benefits, particularly as I think the application has local support and has minimal impact to those around us. For these reasons, I respectfully urge that the application be approved and everyone to reconsider. Thank you.
Right. So we're on to Douglas.
Thank you very much. Is that working, Bronwyn? Thank you. Well, what a turn up for the books. We're actually wanting development in an area where sometimes we turn around and say we don't want it. And we've had two very erudite speakers this evening who put the case, and I think Reps Interlocutor comes to mind. The facts speak for themselves. This doesn't seem to be... Lee, could you put up the overhead projector of the area? Possibly the photograph of the area. There we are. Right. Okay. Looks very green, I know. It's right on the edge of Lindridge Ward, heading for Tenbury Wells, which is that way. The bridge is that way. It's a fairly ribbon development that's happened along the side of the railway line, and I'm actually old enough to see a steam train, remember seeing a steam train along it. So I know exactly the history of the site. Behind us we have former council houses which were developed 1960s, early 70s, and then you have Wirebrook, which is housing association house nearby, very well maintained with open space and grounds to the fore of it on the northern side. Okay, it's a main road, it's an A456, but by God, do we get a speed trap there every month and regularly, and it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone. I think it's just outside the 30-mile-an-hour zone speed limit, but not far away from it. Access is not directly onto the main road. The access is off the side road into Wire Gardens. You turn immediately right there. You've seen the gated access for the applicant's driveway. It would seem, with the support from the community generally, that this application ticks a lot of boxes, and despite the application for being for refusal, I think our policies 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, policy 13, effective use of land, all ticks the right boxes. We haven't seen detailed design, but we're told that it would be in keeping with the character of the buildings already found, and that's pending. No doubt the applicant would be wanting to comply with all the biodiversity gains that would be necessary for such a development. So therefore, I would urge my colleagues on this committee to go against the recommending from our officer for refusal, and that the planning in principle application should be approved, and a further application will come at some point for us to consider things in more detail. But from what we've heard this evening, and from what is available, and from the position of the property, as you can see, I would recommend that this is approved against officers' comments, and I would ask for a seconder to that. Thank you very much.
Do you mean that after hearing other members debate it, you wish? Yes.
Of course.
Thank you. Right. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to broadly agree with Douglas. I know this location. I've actually visited the house in the past, so I know it quite well. It's clear from the photograph that this is only described as open countryside, technically. This is a settlement that doesn't happen to have a development boundary. And the councillor that gave views a short while ago made another salient point, and that this is development within a garden, within that settlement. On top of that, I would draw councillors' memories to an earlier case we had this year in Lower Broadheath, which also didn't have a settlement boundary. And it was also an application for building on a garden that we approved. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much. I just wondered if Councillor Wilmot would appreciate the opportunity to say that although he has visited the house, he perhaps hasn't visited the applicant. I'm assuming it was pre this family, so I just thought I'd give you that nudge.
Yeah, good and relevant point. No, it was not this applicant. It was some years ago with a previous owner. Yes.
Thank you for that.
I remember the house being built. It was quite an interesting
Barbara.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm struggling with this application, I'm sorry to say, as much as I would like to support it. My jury is still out. But what concerns me most is that could this set a precedence? It's in a village which is not a category village. There are an awful lot of villages in and around the Team Valley and around this area. There's Stanford, Hanley William, Rochford, Eastham, just to name a few. And none of them has got settlement boundaries. So what concerns me is that if this does get approved tonight, it could in fact open the floodgates. Now, am I right in thinking, is my memory not fading too much, that we had a similar one up at Cloudstop at the caravan park?
Yeah.
Yeah? And we turned it down. And it was also turned down on appeal, is that correct?
Yeah.
And that was very much similar to this application, and the inspector actually felt to actually turn it down. So, said in the precedence does concern me because of the amount of small hamlets and villages which is about, which which could easily follow suit. But I'd be interested to hear what anybody else says.
Councillor Tom Wells.
Chairman, I think Councillor Williams makes a really important point. I've huge sympathy with the local member here, and it is a strange world in which we live where, paradoxically, we are now arguing against our officers and saying that we should have some development rather than shouldn't have some development. I think the precedent thing could be overstated. I think each application is judged on its merits rather than what might have happened somewhere at some point in the past. That said, I think it might be useful if we could explore why it is on this particular occasion we are ignoring some of the basic planning policies in the current plan, which would describe this site as open countryside, paradoxically, even though quite clearly there's a collection of houses pretty much around it. So it might just be useful to explore, if we're going to go down this road, why it is this site actually is supported, despite the fact that our saved policies in the current plan would suggest that it should be refused.
Councillor Daniel Wharton.
Just on the precedent point, we've just approved a PIP in Lower Broadheath, and the applicant put quite a lot of weight on the fact that we'd approved a PIP just around the corner from it. So there's kind of a gathering thing of potential developments there in the future. So I don't think it's to be overlooked, because obviously as it stands at the moment, the officers are recommending that this shouldn't be approved for good reason, in terms of the fact that obviously there isn't this, within the settlement, there is limited facilities. And the argument when it pulls out in 726 and 727 about the homestead, which we didn't approve in Lower Broadheath and went to appeal, that was obviously a category 1 village compared to what we've got here. So I think I would suggest there is a danger, even though if we're dealing with this, as Tom says, on its own merits, the officers recommended not to approve it. It might then potentially open up potential approvals in the future for ones that maybe, like the officers would come forward in the future and say they on their own merit wouldn't be worthwhile, but there've been argument because of previous approvals. So I think there is something in it in this case.
Any other councillor? Then I'll add my 2 penneth worth in as sympathetic as I am to the concept, it is totally contrary to not developing in open countryside. And there have been various inspectors' decisions in the last 12 months when I've read where similar cases, and they've decided that it is in open countryside, although common sense would tell you it isn't really. And there is this possibility of opening it up to all sorts of applications if we do permit this. Of course, it is, if we turn it down, always open to the applicant to go to appeal if he thinks we've got it wrong. But that's my 2 penneth on it on the moment. Kieran, you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, I mean, I think it would probably be useful just to clarify the policy position and why we have the settlement hierarchy, why the reason for refusal is as it is, and also why it's open countryside. In terms of open countryside, it's automatically open countryside if there isn't a development boundary around a settlement. If there is, then it could be, it's likely to be a classification of categorised village based on the services within that, which is essentially supported by our strategic policies of where the most sustainable locations are for growth and development. In this case, it is open countryside by definition. That's fact. That's in the plan, so that's not for question. It is but you know, it is adjacent to built development, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not in open countryside. So I think that's really important. In terms of the settlement hierarchy, that's all about the sustainability of location, and that's the point which has been raised by officers. We're not saying necessarily that there's landscape harm. We're not necessarily saying that there's not a design of the 3 dwellings in that location that couldn't be acceptable. But going back to the sort of principle on a locational perspective, this is a very isolated location in service sense, and SWDP 4 is the key policy which we've referenced, and we've been successful in resisting appeals on that basis. I think where other applications may or this application may have been more, I'll say may because it depends, if there was something different to those other sites. So if this had been put forward as an affordable housing scheme, for instance, that would have a different weight in the planning balance meeting local need. But this proposal would be open market dwelling. It isn't controlled in any way as an affordable scheme. So we're treating it as open market. I think other schemes within the committee report were referenced, and I think one was First Homes. So again, that was dealt with as not open market in the same way. It has different consideration. So if members were to be minded to support this application, I think it's really important to understand why is this different to an open market dwelling in the next piece of field to this site or the other side of this settlement, and at what point, how could we reasonably resist something if we've essentially accepted it as being a sustainable location for individual housing, unless there's material reasons that justify that. And I, as an officer, I think I'm struggling to understand what those material reasons would be, but obviously that's a matter for the committee. I think I've covered the points, but if I've missed anything or if you need further clarification, please let me know. Thank you.
Mr. John Michael.
Yeah, I'd just like some clarification on some issues. One of the reasons for refusal is obviously the sustainable travelling modes are not there. Well, they do appear to be there, which and also when is a private garden considered to be open countryside? This is a house which sits in its own land, totally encompassed. This is more like sort of infill, but I may be misunderstanding how open countryside is determined when you're considering this is a house with a large garden.
Kieran again.
Thank you. So, I mean, in terms of open countryside, it's a designation essentially. So where the plan draws lines and allocates something, and I mean that's why it is a fact. It is classified as open countryside in policy terms, and therefore we have to apply those policies. And just going back to like I say, the reason that officers recommend refusal isn't necessarily about harm in terms of it being an infill and potentially being capable of being accommodated in that site. It's going back to whether that's the right location from a sustainability perspective. And like I say, it's not one of the categories of villages we would normally support housing. And there has to be, in officers' view, very sort of very good reasons why we would depart from what is a sound planning approach. And that's what our current plan and our future plan basis is on, settlement categories and hierarchy. So we would be taking a different approach. And like I said, there's no reason why a committee can't, if there's a good reason to do that, but there has to be material reasons. And I think at this point in time, there hasn't been anything put forward that would suggest that we should be approving open market housing in an unsustainable location. If there was, like I said, meeting a identified affordable housing need for an application like there had been in previous ones, and that was evidenced, then that could be given weight in the planning process, which then you'd have to weigh up. But ultimately, and I think going back to the services, that the categorisation of villages is based on what services are available in any settlement, and that's again an evidence base, and it does change from time to time. It's not a fixed point in time, but I think ultimately it would be, my view is it'd be very difficult for anyone to argue that that's a location where future residents wouldn't be highly reliant on the private motor car, even if there are some limited services.
Douglas, would you like to make a recommendation, and can you give your reasons for it, if so, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I'm pleased that the councillors have had a chance to speak on this. I would recommend that the committee votes against the recommendation, despite what Kieran had told us at the beginning of the meeting, because I think this is a development which would be appropriate in the circumstances. It has local support. Though it's classified as an open field, it is actually within somebody's garden land, so I think it's a sensible use of land and intensification of use of land within the village context. Weight has been given to the fact that there's no services. Well, Yarrington's buses up and down that road all the time. School buses taking children into Tenbury Wells and I think Lake and Child at Clibberry Mortimer also. So there are services available, and generally speaking in the countryside most of us are reliant on cars. So I would ask for the committee to give this some serious consideration. It would add to our housing supply. It is in or very close to a long established development. A lot of the houses on this side of the road running back towards the old station were built by the railway and were railway cottages and workers' cottages. This is adding on the end of a line of houses, and I don't think it would be it does not give undue harm to the environment and the community generally, and more weight should be given to that rather than our tilted balance, and therefore I recommend a vote against officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Do we have a material reason amongst that's been put forward? Officers, can I ask officers' opinion?
So I think in the I think the reasoning is in relation to there's no conflict with officers about the sort of the impacts, like I say, in landscape and character. So I think that's accepted that it could be accommodated from that perspective. That's why the reason for refusal is on that strategic in relation to strategic policies. Easy for me to say. I think what I was hearing is that the planning balance that Councillor Godwin has reached based on the provision of housing in this location, some service provision, and the lack of other identified harms in his view, the proposal is acceptable in policy terms. I don't want to put words in your mouth from that perspective, but hopefully that captures.
Summing it up, Kieran, I'll go through the list if you want to, but I can match it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Wilmot.
Sorry, Chair, could I ask a question first?
Yeah.
I don't have the document in front of me, but for this classification of settlement, does that classification allow infill? No? Okay. Thank you.
Right. Do I have a seconder for this proposition? No, that wasn't a second. Right. In that case, that proposition falls. I, from the chair, will propose acceptance of the officer's report. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. Councillor Barbara Jones-Williams. Right, can we take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. All of those in favour of the motion to refuse the application in line with officers' recommendations, please raise your voting cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9-4. Those against? 1. Abstentions, please. That's 2 abstentions. Therefore, the motion to refuse the application is carried. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. If anybody was here just for that application, if they want to leave now, that's fine. I'll give you time to go. Right, and we're on to the next application, which is land at Lysinton. And again, Lee, you're on.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a rural exception site under policy 16, which we will come on to. If I lead you through the overheads, we've got the aerial photograph that shows you the site's relationship with Lysinton. The red outline. We've got some sketch proposals that show the site overall. And then we have one that shows a a closer image of the intention of laying out the scheme along those lines. This is a outline, so the detail is reserved matter. We have a comparison with the proposed site at the moment on the right-hand side, I think it is. And then we have the earlier scheme, which was subject to an appeal, which was dismissed for housing development on that site. And so we come to some photographs. We've got the top image, which shows you shows the front of the site as we go towards Lysinton. The red arrow there giving you a bearing on the public right-of-way entry onto the road at that point. And then the bottom, we're looking away from Lysinton. We're looking at the road junction that will be the will be the access to the site. And then I've drawn in that red outline, the red line there that you can see, which is approximately the frontage of the site. And so the site obviously has a planning history with several attempts made to develop the site in recent years. In March of 2022, the appeal was dismissed that I referred to earlier, although that proposal didn't have any policy support as such, and there was a combination of factors, including the effect on the development strategy, the character and appearance of the area, and a significant gap that turned on paragraph 14, which is that we had at the time an up-to-date neighbourhood plan, which obviously didn't have any policies that reflected the proposal at that point. The current proposal obviously differs in so far as it enjoys policy 16 support for the rural exception housing, which is also reflected in the policies of the neighbourhood plan. So paragraph 14 itself wouldn't be engaged at this point, and there is support in principle. Lysinton has seen in recent developments coming forward, obviously affordable housing as part of those developments. They have been factored into the responses that we've been received by the housing officers, and who have essentially come back and said it still indicates a need for positively supporting housing in the affordable housing in this location. So we come back to the significant gap, which of course is something the committee often gets to grips with, and I would at this point sort of draw attention back to the inspectors who have, there've been at least 2 here, and obviously we've dealt with other sites within Lysinton where the gaps come forward. The inspector for this site last time round noted that the location was away from the direct route between Lysinton and Morven, and its presence would have limited effect on the sense of separation between the 2 settlements, which meant that the harm caused to the objectives of the gap policy would be lessened. We obviously need to consider that this is, there is the tilted balance. We've also got the policy support for the proposal in terms of policy 16. There would have to be adverse harm that arises from the proposed development that's in front of us. Clearly, the report considers the local drainage, flooding, biodiversity. It's, you know, we've gone through those. There's nothing there that would suggest that there is a demonstrable harm, a significant demonstrable harm that would outweigh the need to support the boost in housing. So that's where we are, Chairman. So the recommendation is to approve.
Thank you for that. We have an objector, Susan Evans. Again, you have 3 minutes, and it's a button on the left-hand side.
Mr. Chairman, councillors. I understand that the planning decisions are difficult for Malvern District Council given the 5-year housing land supply. But in view of the objections raised by residents of Haywood Drive, I wish to convey the following safety issues that are of great concern should this development go ahead, using Haywood Drive as access to the new site. Currently, there are 23 children living in the houses on Haywood Drive, most of whom are under 10 years of age. These children play outside their homes on bikes and scooters on the drive. From the plan, it appears that the new development site will be accessed via Haywood Drive past the houses where these children play. During construction, this would mean trucks, vans, cars and lorries passing on a daily basis through the estate, increasing the risk of accidents, and once completed, an expectation of at least 36 vehicles using the access on a daily basis, again giving cause for safety concerns for children playing in the area. The entrance from the main A4103 onto the estate is quite narrow, which is a major concern, especially when there are often cars parked in front of the houses on Haywood Drive. Residents already have to take extreme care when entering the estate to ensure there are no cars exiting onto the main road. Otherwise, you have to wait on the main road before it is clear to enter. The A4103 is an extremely busy main road and there's no suitable footpath when leaving the estate for those who have to walk to school. It means crossing the road twice to ensure there is at least some pavement to avoid the heavy traffic. Increased addition of new homes puts more pressure on the village, which has only a small shop, a Chinese takeaway and a pub to service the needs of the village residents, and no bus service apart from the Hereford to Worcester bus, none to Malvern Link, where there are doctors and dentists and retail establishments. For those who do not drive, this has proved to be a problem with the need to take taxis, which are very expensive for those living on tight budgets in affordable housing. Since June 2021, there has been a further new development of 45 houses on Lysington Road and another new development currently underway for 52 houses opposite the primary school, with talk of a solar farm, adding to the amount of traffic along the Hereford and Malvern roads, and with no street lighting, safety becomes more of an issue, especially in the winter months. Lysington has a neighbourhood plan, which residents voted for unanimously, so to continue to disregard this plan makes us feel rather disenfranchised. Thank you.
With the applicant's agent, Jamie Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I find myself in a position where a lot of what I was going to say has in fact already been picked up by the case officer. By way of introduction, I'm a chartered town planner and I'm the agent for the applicant Wolverley Homes. Wolverley has an agreement with Bromford, who will be developing the site on receipt of the necessary planning permissions. And in addressing one of the issues raised by the previous speaker, it is their intention through a subsequent construction management plan to use existing agricultural access onto this site rather than go through the existing housing estate for construction. As you've been told, the application before you is a rural exception site, those which is supported by both the neighbourhood plan as well as the SWDP. The critical element has already been addressed by your officer in terms of the need, and whilst there have been two developments, significant developments at Lysington, they have not met the identified needs which are in the housing needs survey in total. In particular, they don't provide any shared ownership, and there were 6 households requiring shared ownership. This application provides for 5. They don't provide all of both of the 2 bungalows, which this one will provide for special needs, nor do they provide small and large social rented. So we have 2 1-bed units and 2 4-bed units, none of which are available on the other sites. The fact that the application is policy compliant, as confirmed by your officer's report, does provide a significant difference to the rejected appeal scheme. As this site, or that at the time, that did not have policy support from the neighbourhood plan, whereas this current application does. The issue with regard to the significant gap is one which you will have had, as I said, a number of discussions on, as referred to by Mr. Walton. What the framework says is that where we have a policy compliant scheme, that applications should be approved without delay. And in terms of conflict with the significant gap, an exception site would be expected to be counter to normal planning policies such as this, and they are also allowed in AONBs, or National Landscape, and also within Greenbelt. Okay, thank you. So in considering the officer's recommendation, I would urge you to think of those households who had the courage to identify themselves as being in need, and through the consideration of applications on both the allocated site and Lysenton Farms, seeing their needs remain unmet. Therefore, I ask you to permit the application and allow the delivery of these much needed affordable homes. Thank you, Chairman.
Sarah Rouse is a local councillor. She's not on this committee, so she'll be asked to speak from the public thing. And you get 5 minutes, Sarah.
5 minutes?
Why you?
I should have written a speech then, shouldn't I? I have to say, I'm going to have to make it up as I go. I've got some vague notes. Yeah, the reason that we brought this application before committee was actually so the parish council could come and speak. So the fact that the parish council haven't come and spoken, I have to say, is a little disappointing, because I was hoping that they would come and defend their neighbourhood plan. However, for me, there's two halves to this application, and we talk a lot about housing numbers and building houses, but we don't ever actually think about who's going to live in these houses. And there are 1,600 people on the housing waiting list at the moment. And as I work with people who are homeless, I know that if you are homeless currently, it's a 12-month wait to get a home. So you can be sleeping on a sofa for 12 months in Malvern, or you're in a hostel in Droitwich or Worcester. So I really understand that there's a need for affordable housing. I also understand that when you fill in the housing needs survey, you tick everything. And you don't tick everything because you want to live there, you tick it because you think you might get a house. So actually the statistics we're looking at are probably not accurate, as much as, we don't know. I don't know how many people in Lysenton want a house. I don't know what tenure they want, because the housing needs survey we did was, 5 years ago. There's about 12 to 18 houses for sale in Lysenton at the moment, from 2-bed up. So we can't base it really, from my heart, I know, on statistics, but I also equally know how many people are desperate for a home. And as much as we don't want building and we don't want houses, I really would like to see a whole load of 1-bed flats in Malvern, because I know that would very quickly solve a lot of the housing problems. And I desperately wish we'd get on and build at Newland, because we've been going to build at Newland for at least a decade, because that would stop where we are now, sitting here knowing, as I sat 12 years ago, with no 5-year land supply, with no housing plan, about to go into special measures, having to approve things we don't want in places we don't want. And it's like Groundhog Day. I think, how did I get here again? But that's where we are. Actually sat in with Lysenton, with housing on a Christmas tree farm 12 years later. But that said, we do have a neighbourhood plan. We were told if we had 52 houses that would be all we'd need, that will fulfil our housing land supply. And as the lady here said, that site is at the other end of the village, and there is no access to the school unless you cross 2 roads. So if you were thinking of approving this tonight, I would like to ask Bromfords again if they could work with Cotswold Oak to create the footpath link that I have been trying to work on forever, so that if the children are on that site, they can walk from one play area to another without actually having to cross any roads. And then it would be even better if the new estate, which I sat here 12 years ago trying to stop, would then allow the kids to go actually through there onto all of them, so that they could then access the school without going anywhere near a road. So I think that would be really important. And also, somebody just said about the construction traffic. Well, if there is going to be construction traffic, can we have it conditioned that they don't go through Hayward Drive, that nothing goes up there? So I think for me, this is a really difficult application. I would normally be sitting here saying absolutely no, but I know where you all are, and that if we had a 5-year land supply and a local plan, we would not be building here, because I don't think it's in the right place. I think it's the wrong end of the village. It's too far away. The people who are currently living in these estates that we built in Lysinton go in through their driveway and they never come back out because they don't connect up in the village. So if we could create something that connects people up, knowing that we probably can't refuse this, then that's what I would ask this committee to do, to find a way forward that is beneficial to the residents and the kids who are going to live on that estate, so that they can all go all the way round. And I see a man nodding up there, but Cotswold Oak told me the same thing, so I'm not overly... Fabulous. No. He was nodding furiously, but Cotswold Oak, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I have been told that by several other developers over the last 12 years, and here we are. So as much as I would, I brought this so that you can all discuss it and look at it. It is in the significant gap. It has been turned down on appeal repeatedly. I've got such deja vu. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Sarah. Right, we've heard the neighbourhood plan referenced in both ways. I've heard it's no longer relevant, but it is relevant, and it's country, or it isn't country. Have we got some clarification on that?
Yes, Chairman. Policy 16 of our South Worcestershire plan is the rural exceptions policy. That is also then quoted within the neighbourhood plan, so they're supportive of this type of development. So it's not contrary to the neighbourhood plan, thus the paragraph 14 isn't engaged.
Right, Councillor Tom Wells.
Chairman, thank you. I was really pleased Sarah came tonight, because I really was very keen to hear the local member view on this matter. First of all, really, hopefully a straightforward question. The Parish Housing Needs Survey across Lyme Bransford was conducted in 2021. Is that still valid? Is it out of date, Chairman, is my question. It is the answer. Always best to know the answer before you ask a question.
Yeah, sorry, we're just trying to think of the name of the. When housing are looking at what evidence they have, there's the Housing Needs Survey, there's also the Housing Register and Homes for You, I think it is. So they look at various bits of evidence that's available, but it is the best, it's what's available at the time of making a decision, and we can only base it on what information we have. There isn't a more up-to-date Housing Needs Survey as far as I'm aware, so it is based on that.
So, Chairman, if I may, I thought that might be the answer. My unlimited understanding of exception sites states very clearly where other development would not be allowed, certain exceptions have to be in place. One, I think, is a farm connection, a rural, I think a travellers associate site is another, and clearly an exception site for affordable housing, which would otherwise be refused, would be dependent on an up-to-date housing need survey. Now, what seems to be happening recently at Malvern Hills is that we are moving away from that as a determinant, and instead looking and examining the overall housing waiting list that we have for the district, which frankly will, as Sarah suggested, will show up a need pretty much anywhere. And it depends what you mean by a need, by the way. Is it a desire? as expressed in the housing needs survey, that I'd like to come back and live in Lysington at some point in the future. So I'll tick that box. That's the desire. That's not a critical need here then. And if it is a critical need here and then, 4 years ago, I would argue it's out of date. Now, I believe there is such a thing as an out-of-date housing needs survey, and officers haven't given me the determinants in terms of the timescales involved. But I would say to you that a housing needs survey that's predicated on a housing allocation is predicated on a need which is 4 years out of date, where the people involved, and 7 of them I think I can see here, wanted a specific housing arrangement, number of bedrooms and so on and so forth at that time. I would contend that we have moved on from that circumstance tonight, over 4 years later. So then we are dependent on the overall housing register. And if we're going to allocate exception sites on that basis, the precedent that we were talking about earlier will certainly come to fore when basically there will be a justification for building houses anywhere on the basis of 1,500 people being on the waiting list. So we seem to have moved from a local, genuine local need demonstrated by an up-to-date housing needs survey, which explains why that site is being developed, into a more general need, away from the 4-year housing supply. So I'm uncertain that I can support this evening because I'm not sure the evidence base we're using is valid.
Do we have a comment on that from officers?
I think if you go to the housing consultation responses, I did, because these applications generally do tend to sort of, I say sit around, but they take time to come forward. We do have a comment back from housing, which is dated 24th of July 2025, where they run through various figures. You've got housing for you data that shows, that I'm being told, shows 13 households registered with an address in Lyon Bransford, and it breaks down the bedroom demand from Housing for You. And then they go on to quote 12 households registered within the address. So I can only respond to what's on in the response that sort of indicates numbers, if you like, at a local level where there are local addresses being registered.
Quickly, Tom.
Just a quick one. Perhaps we ought to revisit the planning policies for an exception site and look at the criteria that we use in assessing whether the site is a valid site in terms of provision of affordable housing. And that would usually be based on an up-to-date housing needs survey for that parish. What we seem to have now is something completely different. Our housing officers are saying we may not have an up-to-date local housing parish site allocation, but we've got more general information, and actually we can drill down a bit more than that. We can say that there was someone from Lysington who says they might like to live in Lysington. Now that's not a dedicated specific parish housing need survey. That's why we used to do them, Chairman, because they would then support affordable housing sites. So we seem to have moved from where we once were in allocations of very sensitive sites. It's in the strategic gap. Forgive me, I forget my words. And so to do so, we would need to have jolly good reason to trump that. And I'm not convinced by using the data provided tonight, we are able to do that. And I would say, let's have an up-to-date housing needs survey before we start approving sites anywhere and everywhere in the district from now on.
I would add some information to that. Lee will remember because he was there, I think, and we had an inspector's appeal for one in Hallow based on 100% affordable need. And despite recent developments providing low-cost housing, which would have met those in the plan. The inspector said generally, to my mind, that the overall need in our area trumped whatever. So the reality is that is where we are, and as much as I tend to agree with you about the desirability of that, Tom, that was that inspector's decision at that time. Councillor Paul Cummings.
I want to back up your comment about the overall housing need for the district, because in Astley we've got a large number of affordables either started or going to be built, and they're not going to have Malvern Hills residents in them. They're going to have those from Wyre Forest. So this does have the advantage, I think, of being closer to Malvern, and therefore possibly more acceptable to more people. But it is difficult having policies like this when they get overturned on appeal, because it really takes away the purpose of them, Astley being the prime example.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor John Michael.
Yeah, I understand from the agent that there's going to be a separate access road, and the access will not be through Haywards Drive. On the schematic, on the plans here, we've got no representation of where the access is on the plans at all. So I don't know.
That's just for construction they offered. It's for construction as opposed to normal access, as I understood it.
Is that?
Yeah, I'm getting a nod from the. Yeah.
It's only construction. Yeah. Right. Okay. So the normal access into the site will be via Haywards Drive. Okay. Thank you for that. That's the clarification of that.
Councillor David Harrison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Housing needs surveys are very interesting because they don't take into account the houses that have been built or anybody that's on the waiting list 4 years ago that's living in an affordable housing even within Lysington, let alone within Malvern Hills, because I believe that it has to be within the whole of Malvern Hills. So if somebody wants a house that's in Tembury, they can apply for one in Lysington. So it does worry me that the sort of surveys are skewed, I could say, to be very polite. But I do have one question which has been answered very kindly regarding the access. One thing that I haven't had answered yet, and I'm quite interested in it, is on the plan that you have, and you'll probably be able to go to that. It's all very interesting because, no, not that one, there's another one, isn't there? That one, yeah. Just on the entrance into this site, it says phase 1.
Yes.
So is this phase 1, or was the last part phase 1 and this phase 2, and then the next part phase 3?
That's where that path and trees are.
Yes, but there's
Chairman, over the years, as I said, long planning history, Bromford are the provider that's on the adjacent site. They were behind applications to develop this site in the past, as often happens with this type of application where you have a phase 1 and a phase 2. They're saying phase 1, phase 2, and at the time I'm going cross-eyed because it means nothing to me in one sense. So that is their terminology rather than ours.
Last part, if I can, Mr. Chairman. On there, it's got a LAP, LAP. I assume everybody knows that a LAP is an area of green space for children to play on. Has no equipment on it, no nothing. it's about as much use as a chocolate fireguard. If it does get approved, it should be a minimum of a leap, in my opinion, which is a minimum of 5 items, which includes things like swings, a slide, or equivalent, or something like that. Not just an area that's allocated, because you have laps and what have you in between trees, and the kids will put a goal up in between trees or anything like that. Just one of my thoughts, I'm afraid, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. We haven't yet got a proposal on this. We've had 2 sort of semi-proposals from the applicant, and sorry, somebody, I'm not quite aware of who is, but obviously has got power. One was in regards, I think, to Sarah's need or the desire to link up the pathway, which seems a very good desire to me. Can we encompass that in this application at this stage?
Sorry, I can't put it. Can't see you there. I mean, there are some difficulties, but I think what would be open to members is to secure the route through the site to that point, to give every possibility. So through this planning application, if it was approved, you could require a route up to the boundary, essentially. So therefore, if there's agreement, that could be connected through. What we couldn't really do, because we haven't got it's not part of the application site, so we can't require the developer to do someone on anyone else's land. So I think that's the best that the committee do, and it could be part of as requiring as part of the this is outline, isn't it? Just trying to remind myself, as part of the reserve matters, to require those details to be included within the first reserve matters to ensure that it's worked within. I think it's probably showing anyway on the indicative plans, but ultimately we could secure those details to come forward. So I think that would be reasonable, and I think there's good reasons to provide that, that opportunity for that connectivity. Then whether it gets delivered, obviously that's we've gone as far as a committee in terms of what we've secured as possible, and we hope that the developers listen and deliver what they've sort of said they would.
Right. Take that nod. Right, I'm going to.
Yeah, I was just hoping that Kieran might respond to my question about what the current policy actually says that we keep talking about. The rural exception sites and the relationship between them and a housing needs survey. Could we just have the word so we're all very clear? Because I've got a feeling we're moving away from that a bit.
Yes, sorry, I was going to come back on that. In terms of the rural exception policy, it's SWDP 16, and the bit that relates to the evidence is the first part, which needs to be satisfied. And I'll just read out just that particular paragraph. So the first bit says that affordable housing developments will be permitted on small sites beyond but reasonably adjacent to the development boundaries of villages where the following is demonstrated. There is a proven and as yet unmet local need having regard to the latest Worcestershire Strategic Housing Market Assessment, the sub-regional choice-based letting scheme and other local data. And then it says example, neighbourhood plans, parish surveys, parish plans. The only point I would make on that, it doesn't say it has to be all or any of them. It could be some or some other local data that's available. So I think that's partly, it sort of reaffirms your points on the wording, I think. Thank you.
Right, I again from the chair and go and move acceptance of this, hopefully incorporating this need for the path as far as we are able to, and also for the construction. I don't know if it says that the construction to go through an existing farm gate.
Chairman, on that point, yes, the recommended condition number 6 in your agenda does criterion D asks for details of any temporary construction accesses and their reinstatement. So that would mean that the details of whatever construction accesses need to be approved by the local planning authority before development commences. Yeah, so it's pre-commencement condition. I don't think it's necessary to go further than that, but if you wanted to preclude access explicitly from a particular route, then that could be made explicit in the condition. But as I say, we've got officers have got control on that based on the subsequent submission that would come forward in relation to that condition.
Yes, and we have got, because I know David used to pick up this historically, times of working and whatever, as one of the conditions. I think it's standard now. It didn't used to be, did it? Yeah. Oh, this outline, yeah.
The again, Chairman, the construction environmental management plan condition, criterion C, asks for details of the hours that delivery vehicles will be permitted to arrive and depart. I think that appears separately. I'm just checking. Doesn't appear so.
No. I think our standard working hours are what, 7:30 Monday to Friday and 8 o'clock now, is it? 8 o'clock Monday to Friday.
Monday to Friday, and 8 till 1 on Saturday.
Do you obviously members have the discretion to either leave that to officers or to prescribe it in terms of using our standard condition?
Right, Kieran.
So just to add, the Worcester Regulatory Services have a document in relation to construction and demolition, and that specifies specific hours. I can't actually remember what they are off the top of my head, but that's something that we normally refer to in terms of the hours. I think that they're more liberal in the week, and then they're more limited at the weekends, with normally no working on Sundays and on bank holidays. So that would be consistent if members were comfortable with taking that sort of usual approach. And I think it's right in terms of putting a restriction on general hours because of the noise and disturbance potentially given the existing residents. So that's absolutely correct. Including I think it's deliveries, and I think there's in terms of deliveries and actually working, I mean, it's very difficult to please people arriving to start work, but it's the actual noisy construction work that it normally covers. And we've obviously got on the proposal the reserve matters requiring the condition for the reserve matters requiring that access point as well. So we've got a number of sort of amended conditions to deal with, which officers can take away and ensure that that's carried forward if the proposal is favourable to members.
Right, in that case, I'll go ahead with my, and Barbara is seconding that.
Okay.
Yep.
Chair, so all of those in favour of approving the application in line with officers' recommendations, please raise your voting cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. 10. All those against? 1, 2. No abstentions. Thank you. Motion to approve is carried.
Right. So our final application, that at Bath Road, Broomhill and Lee, yet again, your heavy workload tonight.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a full application for construction of up to 70 houses. If I lead you through the overheads, we've got the aerial photograph showing the site along the Bath Road. The red outline that we've received. And then the site plan. Information about the drainage catchment. And then we've got a drawing that we've received, which is indicating where the possible play area might be located and some of the equipment that might be put out in that location. So just here on this side at the moment. We've got the vehicular access point, temporary, he says. And I've got a drawing here that shows how it would be proposed to put back the temporary access being number 2 at the time that we can achieve access via 1, and the legal agreement would include a clause that seeks to secure that process. I've got some illustrations here of we have over the time. This started in 2021. More recently, in the last year or two, we can see here some of the revisions that have sort of been worked on and come forward. We've got a handful of elevations, floor plans, just to take you through. They are not all of them. They would go on all night. But there we go. And then we've got our 3-storey block, 3 of those, 1 at the roadside at the moment. We then go to the roadside on the Bath Road. So this shows you the site from that vantage point. And then we've got images looking to the south and to the north across the site frontage. We then come to some of the 3-storey blocks that are at the Ketch roundabout to show you those that are within Worcester City boundary, I hasten to add. And then we see here the CGI, so a illustration of what the 3-storey would look like in coming forward on this site. And just below, of course, we can see from the roundabout the Worcester City development there from a distance. We've got some more arty images of the buildings that would come forward, how the estate would generally look. And then I've added this one, which shows us the proposed 3-storey across the road. And of course, to the north, to the northwest, you've got Clerkenleet Farmhouse, which you can see on the, I think it's your left. So there's a plan from the past. It's it formed part of the bundle of outline drawings that were approved at the time or accepted. This one is a parameters plan that shows you storey heights. I know that the block of flats 3-storey is controversial for the site location. I would at this point observe that the spine road there that crosses the site, so is it orange or brown colour, that would allow for up to 4 stories. The golden shade would allow for up to 3-storey. And our site, which is, if the arrows, is the arrow there? No, it's not. And we can see it in the corner just over there. That's our site. So we're alongside those golden angles. I think so. sorry, I've sort of wandered a bit, but in essence, we've had some further feedback from our urban design officer, and she's obviously become aware of this particular plan that's out there. And so therefore her feedback to date has been along the lines that a 3-story block in that location is transitional, and that a 3-story development here is not out of place in the longer term. They also note that the site would help make the transition to the 4-story elements of what's shown there on the outline. Given the parameters plan, the urban design officer considers that there wouldn't be a robust case in terms of making a refusal, and in terms of an inappropriate scale in that location. They have said to me today, it's all very fresh, but they would prefer that the 3-story were pushed back slightly within the site from Bath Road. We have a series of possible conditions that we could add in terms of safeguarding external materials, boundary treatment, and also the condition 10, where we refer to the play area, that could possibly be sharpened so that we can achieve something more robust there. I think if in terms of the access, the temporary access, again, I had a word with the highway officers this morning. They sent me through some further considerations in terms of having a temporary access there, whether or not highways support that or not. And I've lifted a paragraph which basically says, whilst we cannot be absolutely certain of the temporary time period for the A38 Bath Road direct access for Bromford's development at this time, or its permanent closure, which is dependent on the realisation of the wider Worcester South Urban Extension access strategy and development phasing, we are reasonably confident that there are sufficient planning and highway mechanisms in place to support the delivery of an internal street connection to the South Worcestershire Urban Extension primary access and the closure of the A38 access in future, alongside measures to ensure highway safety through the access construction phases and any temporary period whereby both accesses would need to be operational simultaneously. I mean, in essence, it's important that this application is seen, the proposal is seen in context as part of the wider South Worcestershire Urban Extension. Also, of course, it's been noted the Council's lack of a 5-year housing land supply at this point, and engagement with the tilted balance in dealing with 70 houses. It requires that that any adverse impacts must be significant and demonstrably outweigh benefits. In considering those harms that are present through some of the comments that have been given by the urban design officer and landscape officer, those harms would not ultimately be considered to add up to be sufficiently weighty to support a refusal. So the recommendation, Chairman, is to approve.
Right, we have a parish council representative, Councillor Rob Gardner, and you're aware of our procedure, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rob Gardner, Chairman of the Planning Committee for Kemsley Parish Council. I'm a qualified planner with experience in local and central government. I'm afraid I've been taken aback by some of the comments which made tonight, which weren't known to us, but I'll carry on anyway with what I'm going to say. Unusually for the parish council, we actually want a housing site to come forward and be built on. You've not heard me say that before. Because of the continuous pressure of unplanned developments around the village, we understand and appreciate the importance of a 5-year housing land supply and have pressed sites like this in the South Worcester Urban Extension to be brought forward as soon as possible. That very issue is going to be debated the next examination session tomorrow for the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review. However, it's not just a numbers game. The National Planning Policy Framework states that the creation of high-quality buildings and spaces is fundamental to what the planning and development process should achieve. And your own South Worcestershire Development Plan Policy 21 has the very same objectives. With that in mind, you might be wondering why it's taken 4 years for this application to come before you. It was not a good scheme when it was first submitted, and it's only marginally better now, even with the efforts of your officers. Your tree and landscape and urban design officer remain critical of it. You've heard something else tonight, as does the parish council. In particular, the 3-storey blocks are totally out of place. Even your officers in the report say it is arguable whether there might be harm from them where located. The applicants say it sits comfortably within the site. That is large part of the issue. They're not within the site, at the edge of the site alongside the A38. As at the Ketch roundabout, you've been told about Clerkenleet Farmhouse. That's a listed building in large grounds, not a building in tightly confined areas like this is proposed to be. Elsewhere, the layout is car dominated. The footpath along the A38 is not wide enough for cyclists as part of the active travel route to Worcester, and the tree and landscaping within this development itself is sparse and deficient. The main issue I wanted to do with tonight, and it's not covered in the officer report, the various comments we've made on it, is the temporary access onto the A38. County Highways has accepted it only if there's a condition or legal obligation to close it, if and when an alternative connection can be made. That can only be across adjoining land which is not owned or controlled by the applicant. The committee report says the layout of the adjoining land will in effect be required to be designed to allow a connection to this scheme. Good luck with that. I think you've all heard of ransom strips. Indeed, the owners of the adjoining land has already objected and says they have not even been contacted about the principle of such a condition. Your report says great weight is afforded to the Highway Authority's position. As such, with the conditions and legal obligation to secure a permanent point of access, the proposals will be considered to be policy compliant. I've heard again tonight, but there is no condition and no legal obligation proposed in the report which require the temporary access to the A38 to be closed and an alternative connection to be made. That must mean the proposals are not therefore policy compliant. There is a Section 106 clause for payment towards the closing of part in the highway, but no requirement to actually do it or to connect to the yet to be designed adjoining site, even if they were allowed to. This is indeed an unresolved issue and the package is not yet fit for purpose. There's no suggestion that the application be refused. We seek improvements to it and we seek the conditions and legal obligations which the Highway Authority hereto have said is necessary for an acceptable highway solution.
And we've got an objector, Simon Weech. Yep.
Good evening all. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. I'm Technical Director with Stantec, and I'm here today on behalf of Welbeck Strategic Land, who are promoters of the Southwest Urban Extension, Southwest Worcester South Urban Extension, known as Hopfields, which is the adjacent site to the north. The application includes provision of a temporary site access off the A38. As you'll be aware, the Hopfields consent includes detailed highway improvements along the A38, including across the full extent of the application site's western boundary. The temporary access proposals would directly impact upon the consented layout for Hopfields. The access is located approximately midpoint between the roundabout serving Hopfields to the north and the Ghost Island Junction to the south. In proposing the temporary access, the applicant has significantly reduced the deceleration and QN length within the approved layout, impacting upon the safe approach to the Hopfields site. While the temporary access is cited to comply with highway guidance, it narrowly achieves compliance with standards and thus compromises safety. We have concerns over the right turn exit movement from the proposed site and the junction's proximity to the signalised crossing, all while trying to navigate proposed inbound traffic. The County Council have provided comment that the temporary access shall be removed upon completion of the permanent access. In terms of the permanent access, the County Council have commented that the applicant must demonstrate that the access proposals are consistent with and do not prejudice the delivery of the Hopfields access strategy. The proposal for permanent access via the northern site boundary connecting to the Hopfields infrastructure. The Hopfields development received outline consent in 2022. The Bromford application, as we've heard, is registered in 2021. It is very disappointing that the applicant has failed to contact Welbeck to discuss the proposals prior to the application being presented to the committee. In the absence of contact from the applicant, Welbeck contacted Bromford last week and a meeting was held on the 27th of August during which my client explained that the permanent access would require their agreement. To clarify, an agreement to access via Hopfields has not been reached. If any agreement isn't reached, the temporary access may become permanent and this will impact upon the Hopfield access proposals. The County Council have suggested an obligation or condition should be added to prevent the temporary access from becoming permanent. Welbeck have serious concerns regarding the enforceability of such a condition, and this would be contrary to national policy and guidance. The proposal to provide the permanent access via the northern site boundary to Hopfield significantly prejudices the layout in this area, and the details are yet to be submitted or approved via reserved matters for the application. The application submitted by Bromford, a further application will be submitted by Bromford for development to the field immediately south of this application site, providing 48 dwellings with proposed access taken via the application site before you today. The planning officer and county council acknowledge in their assessment of the temporary access that the provision in the short term has been found acceptable given the scale of traffic movement on a temporary basis. We would suggest that this comment is based upon the application only and does not consider the future Bromford application and traffic movements due to temporary access. To conclude, provision of the permanent access via Hopfields is fundamental to this application, as recognised by both Worcester Highways and the planning officer in their summary of the application. A planning condition addressing the requirement to close the temporary access has not been proposed. This is contrary to the County Council's request. Welbeck also reiterate their serious concerns regarding the enforceability of such a condition. I therefore respectfully urge members to take this into account as part of your deliberations.
And with the applicant's agent, Giles Brockbank. Both of the previous two speakers, I allowed an extra 30 seconds, I think, so 3.5 minutes if you need it.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee, and thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of this application, which forms part of the South Worcestershire Urban Extension allocation. There were quite a few issues that I wanted to sort of go through this evening, but actually most of those have been well covered by your officers, particularly the issue around the 3-storey element along the Bath Road and how that sits in context with what's been allowed immediately adjacent. And I think, as your officers have said, you know, that will allow some transition along the Bath Road when the wider allocation does come to fruition. But just picking up on some of the points that have been raised this evening, I think, first of all, I think it's only fair to point out that, yes, this application has been in since 2021, but a large proportion of that time it was actually under the guise of Platform Housing Association, not Bromford. It's only relatively recently, with Bromford's involvement, that this allocation and this particular site has started to come forward in a positive manner, and it's been redesigned to respond to its context and what is around it, and again, also very mindful of the wider allocation and how it will fit with that. In that respect, a significant amount of open space has now been proposed and will be delivered as part of this, including a suitable amount of play equipment, and that could be either formal or informal. And in discussion with your officers, we suggested that could be dealt with via condition. In terms of the access, the position of the access has been the subject of ongoing negotiation with the county council, and the exact position of that access is something that the county council consider to be acceptable and appropriate from a highway safety perspective. And that's been looked at and designed very carefully to ensure that it does meet standard and is in an appropriate location. That includes obviously highway safety and all the implications associated with that, and the sustainable transport solutions that will be provided to and from this site and the connections to Worcester. And indeed, there are appropriate contributions proposed in this case to facilitate those. In terms of that access being closed off, there will be and is proposed a clause within the 106. Indeed, there's a draft 106 already been drawn up that will ensure that that access is closed off when the wider allocation comes to fruition. So there are appropriate mechanisms there in place to ensure that that does happen within the fullness of time. And again, the layout has been altered and redesigned and appropriately considered to make sure that our access within the site to the north is positioned to ensure that connection to the wider allocation comes forward. Again, we have been asked by both the district council and the county council to facilitate an access up to the boundary of our site to allow that to happen. That is exactly what we have done in this particular case. Beyond that, the ownership is out of our control. We can only deliver what is within our control and our ownership, and we've made that provision and have done what has been asked of us. So we can deliver this temporary access and then close that up at an appropriate time, as I've said, and we've provided an access in an appropriate location to facilitate the wider allocation and to ensure that that does come to fruition appropriately. Yep, I think all the key issues have been well covered by our officers, and I hope members will support the strong recommendation before them this evening. Thank you.
Right, so I say I overran on the first two speakers, so it seemed fair that the applicant should have the same. Let me see where we are. So, David. Oh, John, sorry.
Yes, very interesting application. First of all, it is 100% affordable. I don't know whether Sarah's still here or she's gone, probably. And it is something that I want as well. Not worried about the 100% affordable, because we've had many sites within our parish that have affordable housing, some of which are 100%. But as was stated, the biggest problem here is twofold, probably three, maybe four. Time frame has been extended, not only because of the change in their ownership of this site from Platform to Bromford, but also the delay with a Welbeck site coming forward. And I thank Mr. Witch from Stantec for turning up. It's a long way from London to come here. Thank you very much. What I am interested in is the access, because I don't think it's viable, I suppose is one way of putting it. The three-storey big block that is right adjacent to the A38. Now, you did show a plan from the Welbeck site. If you could pop that on the screen, I would be grateful. Thank you. This is an outline plan. It's not a full plan. This is an outline plan. Now, they haven't shown the plan, or you don't think you've got the plan that shows the approved plan, which also shows the pedestrian crossing on the A38 adjacent to this site, which I have been duly informed is not an outline, but a full application. And it's in exactly the same place as this particular pedestrian crossing is going to be. The difference is that the Welbeck site have to make the road wider, the A38, they have to make it wider. So instead of being 2 carriageways at present and a 2-foot wide footpath, it's due to be 3.5 carriageways wide and a 3-foot footpath. So whoever builds it is going to have to build it to the same standard, please. I don't want it being built once and then a fortnight later taking it down and building another one. We don't want that. I have had the same problem with speaking to developers and what have you, and I do try to speak to them, but I do inform the officers first and what have you. I have spoken to Welbeck. Officers know I've spoken to Welbeck. I asked Bromford for a meeting and they said yes. I said, but I have to get it from the district council and then absolute nothing sort of thing. So we are where we are. I know I'm not allowed to make a proposition, but I do have a lot of areas of concern. Play area and equipment, they say they're going to put on the site. If you can go to the next plan, I think it is. I'm afraid I have a little tiny, that'll do. Yeah, that'll do, doesn't matter, that's near enough. I've got a little tiny pointer. Along here, that hasn't been out for quite a few years, along here, you'll see there's a green patch all the way north to south. That is called Broomhall Brook. You'll also notice that there is various areas of different colour on the right-hand side. Most of this area on the right-hand side floods. The area, obviously, where they're proposing, I think, is this one up the top, but I haven't seen it before, but there it is, I think. Is that where the proposed site's going to be up there, number 13?
It is indicative, though, and so just to confirm that.
Yeah, okay. But number 9, which is the path that they're going to put in across here, and what have you, I'll have to put some new batteries in this, is quite interesting because a third of the year you won't be able to use it anyway. But that's by the way. The block, as I said, I'm not happy with being 3-storey, but you know, we are where we are. That's up to members to decide and what have you. But the interesting thing is there's no access or provision on this site for any disabled people at all. All the ground floor flats have standard doors. They don't have any wide doors. They're not, you know, on plan. And this is a full application. It's not an outline application. It's a full application. So I'm not happy with that. There's obviously some tweaks probably going to take place. We've had no lighting plan, haven't seen the Section 106 document. If this doesn't get adopted roads within it, then Malvern Hills District Council will obviously require an agreement to drive on it to collect the rubbish. That's another problem because on the left-hand side, down here, where all these are, you can't get within the 25 metre range that you need to pick up the rubbish. So all these residents are going to have to carry all the rubbish to the south because they won't be able to load from the north because the vehicles can't get anywhere close, what have you, sort of thing. Sewers. Kemsey sewerage is full. Nobody says anything about this. There's no documents about it. There's no nothing, but the documents have already said that it's full, and Welbeck are pumping and sorting out to pump to a different, obviously, area than to Kemsey. So where's the sewerage going to go? Somebody mentioned to me about the size of properties. I was under the impression that a property had to be 50 square metres. Some of these are only 40. Some are just under 40. So is that acceptable? I don't know. That's not for me to decide. That's for officers to decide. I'm just going to put my little pointer on again. The intention is that they are going to take off the footpath that runs down here on the outside of against the A38. And they're going to divert that inside and then up alongside this road and what have you, all the way to the top. What happens when we get to the top? You got to cross this access, you know, right, big access like that. It's got all these houses coming in, plenty of cars and what have you. I don't know. Whatever happens, you're going to have to do something there. But unfortunately, I don't think the officers have put in the actual plan that shows that particular footpath. Have you got it in there by any chance? Only what we've got here. Well, where number 6 is on the left-hand side, you've only got to have a look on the planning application. And this footpath has got all trees growing in the middle of the footpath. It's only 2 foot 6 wide. I don't know how wide it is because there's no scale on this. As you can see, there's no scale on it, so I don't know. An active travel route between Kemsey and Worcester is due to go up here. It won't fit. There's no way will it fit. And having trees in the middle of a footpath, it's nearly as bad as the county council have put the street lights in the middle of the footpath further to the north, but we won't say much about that. So I don't believe that those are valid. Car parking numbers, well, I believe they're 1 or 2 short. I think this has been pointed out by the landscape officer, and I fully commend the landscape officer and the tree officer. I think they've done excellent jobs on this, but the developers have taken no notice of it whatsoever. Haven't done anything and what have you. I think it's a mess. I think it's a good mess. I think it can be tidied up. I think it's got to be tidied up and what have you. But I'm going to leave it there. I'd like to come back a little bit later with 1 or 2 other little points if I can, Mr. Chairman. But I'd like to pass on to my co-councillor and also other residents, other councillors that are here.
Right, thank you. Councillor John Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, and thank you, Rob, for that excellent presentation. I think hopefully councillors have got the drift on the problems with this site that we want it to come forward. We've no objections about building there. It's part of the SWDP urban extension of Worcester, but there are certain issues which you've all heard, and principally is the access road into the site. I'm unconvinced that there is the guarantee that they will get an agreement with Welbeck, and we could end up that becoming permanent. Would it be allowed to be permanent, especially with the footpath designated and passed so close to the access? I have also issues with the lining of the A38 with 3-storey buildings, three-storey apartments. I mean, one only has to look at the Worcester City site to see how appalling they can look, and they should be further back into the site, in my opinion. If one looks at the master plan that we had for the outline planning application at Welbeck, you'll see that the road structure has totally been designed for these sites to be encompassed, access roads to be encompassed within the development and not onto the A38. We don't want a lot of the A38 becoming like the River Severn with a lot of tributaries coming into it from different developments. That is certainly not what we want, and that's one of my major bugbears with this thing. But I'll leave it at that and leave it and open it up to the rest of the committee to make any further comments they wish to make.
It's just a question about education, just to understand, because I've read through this several times. I just want to be clear on this, and David or John will probably be able to answer me, I would imagine, or one of the officers. Just in regards to primary education, the children are going to go to school that's not yet built. Is that the case? Where are they going to go to in the meantime? And then on secondary education, because I guess they would be Handley Castle, but they're going to nunnery. Is there going to be a bus service able to take them to secondary? And are there places? There's just, I know we've not covered education yet, but just cover those 2 points off.
So just trying to locate the bit in the report.
It's just interesting for children and parents, though, isn't it, to know where their children are going to go to school.
It's quite detailed, the bit in the report. That's so I mean it's all there in terms of which schools are directed. They mentioned Kempsey Primary. It's in the catchment of Handley Castle High School, Nunnery Wood.
Sorry, Kieran, it is there, but just in some of it is kind of quite sort of this is going to happen in the future. So it was more around the lines of when is that likely to happen?
Got you. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, in terms of the contributions, they've obviously identified what their requirements are from an education perspective, I suppose, and they've set that out, and they've set out their requirements for developers to pay a sum to allow them to make that provision. I think it does include mainly for place planning, I think, in terms of the cost of pupils. Is there a contribution for travel? Yeah. So I'm just checking the highways contributions as well, because sometimes they overlap with what's required. So yeah, in terms of the highway contributions, there is ones for home to school transport for primary. There's some of the infrastructure upgrades as well, and that's required. The trigger point for the transport to school is prior to first occupation, so it's required to be paid. That helps. Sorry, it's the 2 bits.
No, that's fine. Just in terms of the primary school, do we know when that's due to be built? Because obviously this isn't the only development in the area, so.
Yeah, I don't know the triggers off the top of my head, but they're based on the development itself being brought forward, the Welbeck site, if you like. So they come on triggers there. I mean, I can confirm triggers, but if I said a number now, it wouldn't be right, so I'll probably better not. But it'll be quite a few hundreds into it.
Thank you. Just for my own information, because the plans don't quite tally that. I know the block number 14 at the corner there, is it? I'm assuming 1 is a footpath pedestrian crossing. What's number 7 down here on the bottom boundary?
Sewage pumping station.
Ah, right. Thank you very much.
I've looked at this, and to be honest, what we call Colditz is actually impinges on Colditz's reputation, I think. Whereas to be honest, the 3-storey buildings here, to my mind, look a vast improvement on that. Whether it is the right location, I don't know, but they certainly don't have that horrible look about them at all. So there's been some thought gone into the process. There are things I'm worried about. I'm certainly worried about this active transport and the width of the path. I think that is important. We're all aware of that in their own areas. I've been fighting to get a wide path between Worcester and Harlow for 25 years and I've still not achieved it. And people will take their children to school on bikes if there's actually a safe route to do so. I think it was me picked up on the size of a room where I think our housing officer was worried about the size of the rooms, particularly in the single properties, which there are quite a few, and that would worry me. And I understand that the suds have to be underground for some reason, although air officer would, landscape officer would prefer them on top, and generally I'd prefer them on top, but I understand there's a technical reason for that not being so. I think there are various concerns. I think the mood of most of the people in here at the moment, and those I've spoken to, are there in supportive of there being a development here. It is the detail which worries them. I'm wondering whether the appropriate motion would be to support it, but only to approve it with local members and I forget now we term it now.
Yeah, I think I rather do agree with you. So maybe if the local members are happy, if we approve in principle with the local members and obviously the officers, and if the local members aren't happy, can they bring it back to committee at a further date? I mean, is that possible?
Kieran, can you advise on that?
I mean, at least that will move things forward, won't it?
Thank you, Chair. So it's open to members to come to a resolution similar to that. So I think what would be important is just being clear about what the reasons to take it away are, and sort of nailing that away. The resolution could be to delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Infrastructure, subject to exploring, amending with the applicant various elements, and then agreeing in consultation with the local ward member. And it requires that consultation and agreement with the local ward member. Then, if that wasn't to be achieved, then that would give a mechanism for the ward member to refer it back to committee.
Or would the ward member be happy with that?
I'd be very happy.
Right, I'm going to move that then. Councillor Godwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Two things, and they might be seen petty. One, roads. This is 100% affordable housing. So the roads won't get adopted. So how do we guarantee that this road and this estate is going to be maintained in the future? Because the housing association will change, they will sell stuff, they will move on, stuff won't get maintained, the folks there won't have the wherewithal for a housing association, residents association to fund anything, and in 20 years time we'll have dilapidated roads and nobody putting them right. That's one. And if I may, secondly, design of the houses, and we have seen some of it here. I'm referring to practical experience here. The hallways have got to be wide enough to keep a pram and walk past them, to the stairs and the front door and to the rest of the property. Okay, or a bicycle. The ones that have been, I've seen, the front halls were too narrow to actually put a child's pram or pushchair and walk past it. And again, we're dealing with 100% affordable housing. And we have here future design criteria that it should be of a high standard and have a longevity longer than a mortgage and replace the roof within a lifetime. Thank you.
Right, I'm sure our local members will take that into consideration in these discussions if my motion gets approved. Lee, you wanted to speak?
Just to let members know that this morning the applicant did confirm that it's their intention to have the roadways adopted, all the internal roadways adopted other than private drives.
Intention. So they're going to put a bond down to guarantee it?
No.
Will they put a bond down? Will they put 800,000 on deposit? Will it meant that it's actually going to happen? Or will they change their mind in 3 years' time? Sorry, we're not bothered with it.
Anyway, that's been raised.
I take it, it's read.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I know where you're coming from because we have got experience of it.
we've done
Yeah.
it before.
Yeah.
Run away.
Right. Do I have a seconder for my motion? Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Right. Would you like to take the vote on it then?
Thank you, Chair. All of those in favour to approve the application in consultation with a local ward member, please raise your voting cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that unanimous?
Defer you didn't say, but defer the detailed decisions, conditions until discussions have been had.
Is everybody clear what they're voting on then?
Yeah. I think we understood that from.
How should it be phrased?
After consultation with local members.
Yeah, but
Do you want me to just, I think the wording, which I said earlier, just to avoid any doubt, and it would be, I would have liked just to be a bit more specific about the areas which we're taking away to, agree with the local ward member. But I mean, what I'll do, I'll try and capture them, but I would like a little bit of clarity. It is to delegate approval of the application to the Director of Planning and Infrastructure, subject to, and then it's exploring further amendments in relation to this. There's definitely a design point.
of the whole site.
So a whole redesign now.
Well, there isn't all of it to be redesigned, but it's easier to do that because some of the roads are wrong, some of the footpaths are wrong, so a lot of it needs amendment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some, again, the level of change is what I'm trying to get at, I suppose, because yes, ensuring a footpath isn't 2 meters rather than 1.5 meters, different to moving 3-story buildings in the plots. And I think from an officer's perspective, I think you've heard about the context, and I don't, I need to know whether you're saying it needs that level of redesign, or we're talking about those technical matters in terms of addressing those, looking at I know there was mention about some landscape aspects. I know there was also a mention about the play areas and the location of that, which obviously there is a condition, but we can explore that a bit further. There was a number of things mentioned, and I think I can't take, ultimately we can't we've got to be some specifics within the resolution rather than leave it totally open. It's not very reasonable if we weren't to do that. So I think some clarification around that, and then that would allow officers to have those discussions, and it'd be led by the ward member to a degree, but we've got to be able to know what the scope of it is, I think. So that's where that should be included in a proposal. I mean, just a blanket proposal just is not good practice.
David.
Yeah. Well, reciting of the 3-story, because there are no 3-story properties within Kemsey.
Can I just check that you are aware of the context of the adjacent site and the plans?
I am. That has got outline planning permission only. This is detailed planning permission.
But the council have granted a parameters plan that allows development admittedly up to 30 metres and then 15 metres. And I think we've got to be realistic about what we're asking for from that perspective.
Can you clarify?
Yeah.
Can you put that
I think
for the overall site thing where the 4-story blocks are?
I think it would be helpful, because I think so. This is the adjacent site and I think we know where the application site we're talking about now.
So the dark brown is.
So if I'm going to have to just point. Well, this is the approved parameters plan on the Welbeck scheme that we know. The apartment blocks we are talking about is in this top corner here. Adjacent in this site, according to the key, up to 30 metres in height. The proposals, Lee will hopefully correct me if I'm wrong, of the 3-story apartments, so approximately 11.5 metres. Moving north into this orange area allows up to 15 metres. So, and adjacent to the site again is up to 30 metres. So I just, I'll go back to the mic, because sorry for anyone who didn't pick that up, but ultimately we can't ignore this context that although it is outlined, these are parameters that have been deemed acceptable. Of course, we have to assess the suitability of a detailed design, and that is what we have today. But if we've seen the visuals. If you were talking about, I know there has been talk of building line, and that was mentioned. If you're talking about moving it back a metre or something to create a slightly more break on it, that's probably something that we could accommodate and might be reasonable. But I think if you're talking about a whole redesign of a scheme that where we haven't really got any strong grounds, but I don't think that's what you know. Again, it's not very clear to me what the requirements are from the design perspective. I understand I understand the point, and I don't disagree with the point about the level of accommodation and the size of the rooms, and that should be explored to see what could be achieved there, and also the access point for those ground floor bungalows, because to ensure that they are accessible, that is quite right. And there's some other areas in terms of clarification, in terms of the tree planting on the cycle routes, making sure that they are to appropriate width to ensure that the carriageway, the active travel routes and connectivity is achieved. So you know, again, it's pinpointing those things so we can actually go to the applicant. This is what you've been asked to do. It's, you know, it's within a reasonable request, and have that discussion. Otherwise, we've got to be. I mean, it's ultimately members' decision. So you know, I'm not trying to push that. But if we go down that route, we are heading down the route that we may end up that the applicants aren't going to be willing to do something that they consider to be unreasonable.
Thank you, Kieran. Access, obviously, you know, is a problem. If this gets full planning permission, then what happens to the 2,204 properties that are going to come under Welbeck? Are they going to say, bye-bye, we're off? Whether these 70 are more important than the 2,204, I don't know. I believe there should be some tweaks to the general layout to conform to the officer that you pay, i.e. Jo Bounds, to do her work and what have you, and is part of Malvern Hill staff. And okay, you've got a new comment from her today, which hasn't been published yet. It hasn't been sorted out yet. Obviously will be fairly soon. But, you know, until we sort of see the grand detail of that, and taking the previous ones into account as well, would be interesting. I don't know. We have no details of any lighting plan. Is there going to be one? Is it going to be lit? I don't know. We as members haven't seen the Section 106 document yet. We usually do before a thing goes through, what have you, but fine. I know it was mentioned about the access for prams and what have you. And I know it does say in the document somewhere that they will be providing sheds. They will be providing space for wheelie bins and also for drying your washing. Interesting. It is now not common practice to store bicycles in flats, and the fire brigade have recently refused access. No mention has been made here about where bicycles are going to go. Again, I did mention about the adopting of the roads. I mentioned about the sewer discharge. I think that's a condition, but it's a critical condition. Okay, it'll come at the end. The widths of the paths and the street scene guidance. I know it's only guidance, you know, and I assume that they will, you know, that will be sorted somewhere along the line. But we don't have detailed plans that show the widths of the footpaths. We don't have anything that we can actually look at and say, yes, is it sort of the required width for an active travel route, or is it not? As far as the, you know, it was also mentioned again by the landscape officer that the car parking numbers were short. I don't know because they're not numbered, so you can't work out which ones belong to which and which ones are actually parking spaces and which ones are just open space. Very difficult. One of the first things that I did say was that we require tweaks to the general layout. We need to know these things when we're approving items. It's not an outline application. This is a detailed one. This plan, if we'd approved it today, and I'm not saying we're not yet, we may approve it today, but if we're approving it today, then if they build it to this, then as far as the footpaths are concerned and the access for disabled people are concerned, then it's tough because that's what we've approved if this is approved, and that's what they were built, and that's what we've got to put up with. You won't be able to change it after. You can't change it after. You only get one hit at it, and it's the first one. So, you know, it does worry me. Are there any solar panels on it? Lee can probably answer that. I don't know.
David, I think we're getting into whether we, away from where we were going at the moment. I think the representative, I've seen him busily writing, I hope he's taking it as constructive criticism as such, rather than destructive and getting in the way. I would hope that we have shown, if we actually approve this motion I put forward and David seconded, that we are keen for this to go on, but we would rather there was some rather rapid discussion to alleviate some of these problems. And no doubt, David, you wouldn't expect everything that you've been talking to be resolved, because sometimes it can't be. So I think if we leave it, I'm aware of what you're saying, Kieran, but I think at the moment there are various things which probably would resolve themselves relatively rapidly. I don't see the access ever resolving itself at the moment unless there's some very good will from the future developer on the other side. Yeah. So, but at the moment, I'd like to put this motion forward on the basis it was taken. And I'm sorry if it's a bit vague.
No, I think that's that's clearer now, because I think there is obviously part of it is design focus, but I think there seems to be more acceptance of what might be realistic in terms of amendments. I think, of course, there are a number of conditions, and there are conditions relating to drainage and that, but I think it would make sense that they are reviewed and updated in consultation with the local ward members as well, to ensure that they capture everything that there's quite a bit of discussion, and make sure that they would be nailed down. And there is the section 106, which I believe should deal with the access road as well, access arrangements as well. So that can be clarified and agreed as well. So if members are happy on that, it's to delegate those matters for approval to the Director of Planning Infrastructure in consultation to explore those outstanding matters, and then in consultation with the local ward member.
Right. Jenny.
Okay.
We would like a discussion with the applicant. Quite happy.
Thank you, Chair. All of those in favour of approving the application as outlined by Kieran, please raise your voting cards. I think that's unanimous, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you for your attention and the detail you've put into it.